Hey guys, what's going on? It's me, Jay. A lot of developments have happened since we last were on here talking about professional wrestling. A lot of stuff. And basically, a lot of the matches for WrestleMania 41 are up in the air as of now. One of them is Kevin Owens versus Randy Orton. We thought for sure that Kevin Owens and Randy Orton was going to be one of the matches at WrestleMania, but now we're confronted with the reality that unfortunately, due to an injury, Kevin Owens may have to retire from wrestling. Maybe. We've seen this before. We saw this with Edge. He made a big retirement speech. Daniel Bryan made a big retirement speech because of injury. And they didn't retire from wrestling. They eventually came back. With Edge, um, it took about 9 years, but he did return, and with Daniel Bryan, it was more like 2 years, right? But that's really sad for KO. He's an extraordinary performer. He always enjoyed his work. Always enjoyed his matches, especially with Sami Zayn and the stuff with the Bloodline. But even outside of Sami Zayn and the Bloodline, he had pretty good stuff. So I hope he gets better, and I hope he does return to wrestling. But as for WrestleMania, um, this leaves a question. After Nick Aldis, announced Kevin Owens, and Kevin Owens came out and made his speech, Randy Orton attacked Nick Aldis. So there are rumors circulating about who Randy Orton's opponent is going to be. And people are saying Rusev because a couple of weeks ago, Rusev, it was leaked out that David mentioned before that on the channel that Rusev and CJ Perry are back together, which they are. But then the news came out that Rusev has left AEW and he's going back to the WWE. So I'm thinking this will be carrying Cross, David. I don't know about that. I'm thinking this will be like similar to Cody Rhodes' return against Seth Rollins, at WrestleMania 38, where it's a mystery opponent for Randy, and then all of a sudden, Nick Aldis produces Rusev. So, who knows? We gotta wait and see. But I think, you know, it's safe to say Rusev. Maybe it'll be Aleister Black. Malachi Black is returning as well. He's leaving AEW and he's coming to the WWE. Basically, a lot of people are jumping off that AEW ship and coming back to the WWE. We saw it with Cody Rhodes. We saw it with CM Punk. We saw it with Malachi Black. We saw it with with Andrade, Page. Uh, there's talk about Page coming back. So many people that in that initial wave when AEW first started, like 2019, 2020, 2021, they all left the WWE, cleared out of the WWE, were fired, and then went to all star. Everybody started going to AEW, and they're starting to realize people are starting to realize that AEW is poorly managed, that AEW doesn't have direction, that AEW basically sucks. Even Bret Hart has come out and said that he came out online publicly and said that AEW, they're like actors pretending to be wrestlers. So there are a few guys that did leave did leave WWE and go to AEW, like the Hurt Syndicate, MVP and Bobby Lashley. They left. And they're in AEW now. But the majority of the movement from one company to another is from AEW to WWE, not from WWE to AEW, which is a stark contrast from 2 or 3 years ago when almost nobody left uh, AEW and went to the WWE. All the movement was from WWE to AEW. Things have drastically changed in the world of professional wrestling between the two companies. David says he's okay with Randy Orton versus Rusev. I am too. It'll be a nice return to see Rusev as well as Lana back in the WWE. It'll be Rusev Day. So other people are saying it'll be Nick Aldis's return to wrestling. He'll step out of his general manager role and he'll start wrestling. He was a former NWA Power champion, so that's a possibility. But I think most safest bet is Rusev. Now, the other big SmackDown news. CM Punk, since War Games, has been talking about this favor. Remember, Roman Reigns' bloodline did not have enough members, and they were trying to recruit all the members that they knew. They were trying to recruit Seth Rollins, trying to recruit everybody. And nobody wanted to join Roman Reigns' bloodline because when they were on top and he was basically the champion for his astronomical run, the bloodline bullied and feuded with everybody, especially Kevin Owens, Seth Rollins, and Drew McIntyre, right? So they had no friends in the world when it came to this. So Paul Heyman, Roman's manager, called in a favor. And the favor for the person that he called in was CM Punk. And CM Punk was the partner for Roman Reigns' bloodline, and they went on to win War Games at Survivor Series 2024. Remember that. But for months and months, the mystery has been, what's the favor? We thought on Raw in London, on SmackDown in London last week, that there was a contract signing of the triple threat match, Seth Rollins, CM Punk, and Roman Reigns, and we thought for sure that the favor was for CM Punk to finally achieve his dream. CM Punk leaving the company in 2014, leaving wrestling in 2014 because he didn't get the main event match at WrestleMania that he was promised. He was at WrestleMania 30, he was supposed to wrestle Triple H. And he goes, wait a minute, that's not the main event. The main event is the last match, because they tried to gaslight him that he had the main event at WrestleMania 29, and he did not. He wrestled The Undertaker, and the one that went on last was John Cena versus The Rock, right? So he felt like he was never going to get a WrestleMania main event, and that was his dream, the main event WrestleMania. It slipped through his fingers last year because he got injured at the Royal Rumble, right? So he finally wanted it this year. So we thought that was the favor. And it was a really emotional moment, the contract signing. Paul Heyman, CM Punk's best friend, says, Punk, you're finally going to achieve your dream and you're going to main event WrestleMania. Now, it's night one. It's not night two. Obviously, Cody Rhodes versus John Cena is night two. But it still counts. So we thought that's the favor, but then CM Punk says, no, that's not the favor. So we're left wondering, what's the favor? So this week, WWE has returned to United States, CM Punk's hometown, Chicago. He comes out, he says, when Roman Reigns gets here to the building, I will announce what the favor is. So Roman, he's pissed off. He doesn't even say anything to Paul Heyman. He just cruises, walks right past Paul Heyman. Because he wants to know what's the favor. Seth Rollins comes out. He gets a lot of cheers, people singing his theme song. He says he doesn't know what the favor is. Finally, Punk comes out, and Punk reveals what the favor is. And the favor, it goes back to 2011, 12, 13, when CM Punk was on his 400 and something day run, his historic run back then, right? And Paul Heyman was his manager. And Paul Heyman said that when he main events WrestleMania, it won't be then, but it will happen. And when it does happen, Heyman will be in his corner. So Punk decides, I'm cashing in this favor. At WrestleMania, I want Paul Heyman to be in my corner. So now Paul Heyman is in an impossible situation. He's the wise man to the tribal chief. What does he do? Who does he choose? And it's a tense moment between Roman and Heyman because Roman is telling him, say no. Obviously, you can't be in his corner. I took you in. I made you relevant again. Because remember the storyline. Paul Heyman was managing Brock Lesnar. And Brock Lesnar, after WrestleMania 36, was out of wrestling. At that time, 2020, we didn't know what was going to become of him. He was going to go to AEW. He was going to go back to the UFC. He was just going to retire from wrestling. And where would that leave Heyman? And in the summer, Roman Reigns turned heel, and Paul Heyman became his manager. And he went on to win the Universal Championship. So it's true, kayfabe-wise, that Paul Heyman wasn't relevant after WrestleMania 36, and it was Roman who made him relevant once again. And through his counsel, Roman Reigns as a heel and the bloodline became number one in the WWE. So technically, Roman's right. But CM Punk and Paul Heyman are best friends. CM Punk was the one who, remember, 2011, CM Punk cuts the pipe bomb promo, and he mentions Paul Heyman. Paul Heyman at this time in 2011 was out of professional wrestling. He wasn't in wrestling. He left in 2006 after WWE destroyed his creation, brought back ECW only to embarrass ECW. The December to Dismember pay-per-view. Paul Heyman threw up his hands and said, fuck it, I'm leaving this company. I'm leaving professional wrestling in 2006. And it wasn't until CM Punk started mentioning him and started calling himself a Paul Heyman guy because they were going to fire CM Punk. Paul Heyman, when CM Punk first came to the WWE, and this is 06, 07, the first time, Paul Heyman lobbied for CM Punk. He paid attention, of course, to the indies, to ROH. Punk was already a star on the indies, in ROH. He already had the classic matches with Samoa Joe from 2004. So Heyman wanted to bring him in. Vince McMahon didn't see anything in CM Punk, never saw anything in CM Punk, but it was Paul Heyman who lobbied for CM Punk. Punk first became a star in WWE on the ECW brand when Heyman was booking it. And they became friends after that. So just like Heyman lobbied for Punk in 06, 07, Punk then lobbied to bring Heyman back in 2011 and 12 as his manager. They're best friends. They're best friends in real life. And of course, you could see the happiness in Heyman's face when it was announced that Punk will be main eventing this year. But Roman and Heyman are also very close. It was Roman who inducted Heyman into the Hall of Fame last year. So Heyman is like in between a rock and a hard place. What choice does he make? Is he in the corner of Punk or is he in the corner of Roman? And the problem David says he should have started in ECW. Yeah, that would have been cool because fans would have known. CM Punk was a star in the Indies, man. He had already been in TNA for a little while. He was in TNA for like a cup of coffee. I think he had a feud with Raven at that time. For a while, they did a feud with him and Raven where, like, you know how Raven was like a drug addict and CM Punk, of course, is straight edge. And like, uh, oh no, uh, the feud with Raven and Punk, it did happen, and it was in 2003, but it was in ROH. But at one time, CM Punk did appear on TNA because at one time during the early 2000s, TNA had a working agreement with Ring of Honor, and they would bring in talent and they would trade talent. It wasn't until it it wasn't until it was discovered that Rob Feinstein, the founder and owner of Ring of Honor, was a pedophile that uh, TNA and Dixie Carter stopped doing business with Ring of Honor. David says John Cena turning heel is not doing so good. Um, about John Cena's promo on Raw, um, I don't know. I agree with David in a way. It's not really hitting. I think they're going to switch course and they're going to turn him face again after WrestleMania. Like, get the WrestleMania match out of the way with Cody Rhodes and then turn him back face again. Because David's correct. It's not really. I mean, they tried everything. They brought the kid into the storyline, the kid from Belgium. You know, Cody Rhodes attacked him in the Raw in London. You know, but I think they're going to put the belt on John. They're going to have to put the belt on him because if he doesn't win the championship, then there was no point in turning him heel. That was a complete waste. So, uh, that's it for WrestleMania. You know? But people are predicting it's going to happen with Paul Heyman, though, with this Paul Heyman storyline, is that Paul Heyman is going to turn heel and turn on both Roman Reigns and uh, CM Punk and align himself with Seth Rollins, and that will be his new the new wrestler that he manages because I can't see him continuously managing either CM Punk or Roman Reigns, considering their baby faces. And since Heyman turned face at Madison Square Garden last year, when the bloodline, when Solo Sikoa's bloodline attacked him, you know, he's been with Roman, but Paul Heyman is a natural heel. You know what I mean? I think this is the first time ever in his career that he's been a baby face. He's always been really a heel. You know, going back to the days when he was Paulie Dangerously in AWA and Paulie Dangerously in WCW, and even as the ECW owner, you know, with the ECW invasion to the WWE fans in '97, he was a heel. So Heyman is a heel. You know what I mean? Having him as a babyface is kind of weird. And plus, unless you're Precious Paul Ellering, babyface managers don't really make sense. Or Paul Bearer. You know what I mean? Like they were good babyface managers with The Undertaker and LOD respectively, but a manager is better as a heel because a manager cheats, a manager takes shortcuts, a manager lies, a manager talks shit, and the fans hate him. A babyface manager does nothing because a babyface can't cheat. He's a babyface. A babyface can't cut corners. Having a babyface manager, all the manager really does is having that little manager could get heat on the heel and the manager gets beat up. But it always seems weird when a manager is a babyface because I don't know, we naturally our years of watching wrestling, we've been trained that you know that managers are heels. Jimmy Hart was a babyface manager with Hulk Hogan. Paul Ellering, like I said, with the Road Warriors, and Paul Bearer with The Undertaker. But that's about it. And at one time, Jim Cornette was a babyface when his Midnight Express, turned face in 1988. But he was feuding with Heyman. He was having manager matches with Heyman. So, and when Heyman, you know, either left WCW or went on to do other things, they turned Jim Cornette and the Midnight Express back heel. You know what I mean? So a babyface manager is kind of worthless. You know what I mean? Arnold Scullin is another example of he was the manager of Bruno Sammartino and he was the manager of Bob Backlund when they were WWF champion, you know, WWF champions, but he didn't do nothing either, really. He threw in the towel for Backlund in '83 when he lost to Sheik. But all he would do is he was like a boxing manager. He would take, you know, disrobe them, take the belt off, and just walk around and parade around with the belt. And that's it. You know what I mean? Like a manager should be a heel. The concept of a manager in professional wrestling is a heel. You know, the first manager ever, Bobby Davis, in the early '60s, managing Nature Boy Buddy Rogers. You know, a heel. You know what I mean? So it only makes sense that Heyman should turn back to a heel. and turn Rollins heel because Rollins, they like his theme song, but to me, Rollins is another guy he's a natural heel. And they have a strong baby face, two strong baby faces in Roman and Punk. They need more heels, especially now that Kevin Owens is not wrestling anymore. Kevin Owens had a lot of heat with the pile driver gimmick. But John Cena as a heel, maybe John Cena could benefit from a manager because his heel promos sucked. He doesn't give good heel promos. Cena's a natural baby face. He's struggling, like David is saying, he's struggling as a heel. You know what I mean? He's struggling as a heel. If The Rock wasn't such a big celebrity, uh, outside of wrestling, he could do most of Cena's talking for him, and then Cena just stand there, and then they would just get residual heat from The Rock. But that's not going to happen. So, if they're going to keep Cena heel, why not make Cena a Heyman guy? Why not align Heyman with The Rock and John Cena? Because Heyman's really the only manager they have, and he's really the only mouthpiece that they have. That's the point of a manager. He's a mouthpiece to get heat with a wrestler. If the wrestler either is gimmick details that he can't cut promos, like for example, he's like Yokozuna or like Kamala, or he's not good at cutting specific promos either, you know, as good at getting heat. Sometimes you don't need it, but it's an extra added heat magnet. Like for example, the Grand Wizard was the manager of Superstar Billy Graham. Superstar Billy Graham didn't really need a manager. He was good at promos. Same thing with Rick Rude. He didn't need Bobby Heenan, but he was good at promos. It only added to his character though, having Bobby Heenan as his manager. But yeah, having Heyman as a face, it's like having Bobby Heenan as a face. Bobby Heenan was never a face. There was an interesting storyline that they were going to do. Speaking of Heyman, that they were going to do in 1990. I think it was 1991. Right? Heyman mentions this that uh, he got a call from Vince McMahon because he was when Bill Watts came in. Heyman was in WCW, but when Bill Watts came into WCW, uh, he didn't like Heyman. He felt like Heyman was getting paid too much money from the last owner of WCW, uh, K. Allen Fry. Too big of a salary for playing such a minor role like Heyman was. And apparently, Watts said some anti-Semitic shit to Heyman. Heyman sued WCW. He was fired from WCW. And there were talks about bringing him into the WWE, having him do something similar. The way that he was brought into the NWA and he turned Jim Cornette heel, have him come into WWF and turn Bobby Heenan. He turned Jim Cornette a babyface, have him come into WWF and turn Bobby Heenan into a babyface. That would have been interesting. You know what I mean? Heyman come in with somebody and then Bobby Heenan have somebody. Bobby Heenan be a babyface and Heyman be a heel. But it never materialized. He eventually went back to WCW in you know in the latter half of 1992. And we see another video package of Triple H. By the way WWE is promoting Triple H going into the Hall of Fame, you would think Triple H was the only wrestler going into the Hall of Fame this year. Forget the natural disasters, forget Lex Luger, forget Michelle McCool. All about Triple H this year going into the Hall of Fame. It's ridiculous. You know what I mean? But hopefully, Tony Khan does the right thing in regards to Sting, and Sting is allowed to come to the Hall of Fame and induct his friend Lex Luger, because there's nobody else that's more closely associated with Lex Luger's wrestling career than Sting. They were best friends on camera and behind the scenes. They even owned the gym together. So we'll see where Tony Khan, the owner of AEW, stands with regards to working at least a little bit with WWE. With regards to that, TNA did it. Ric Flair in 2012, when Ric Flair and the Four Horsemen were inducted into the Hall of Fame, TNA, he was under contract. Ric Flair was to TNA at that time, and TNA let him go to the Hall of Fame, WWE's Hall of Fame. So maybe AEW will do the same thing. I don't know. They let Jericho do Austin's podcast years ago, but at that time, AEW was just starting off and they needed the exposure. So let's see. Thank you, David, for contributing. Thank you, Lisa, for contributing as well. Peace.